Chapter 6. The days grew longer. The cows moved close to the pond where the water was cool and there were trees. Papa taught Sarah how to plow the fields, guiding the plow behind Jack and old Bess, the reins around her neck. When the chores were done, we sat in the meadow with the sheep, Sarah beside us, watching Papa finish. "Tell me about winter," said Sarah. Old Bess nodded her head as she walked, but we could hear Papa speak sharply to Jack. "Jack doesn't like to work," said Caleb. "He wants to be here in the sweet grass with us." "I don't blame him," said Sarah. She lay back in the grass with her arms around her head. "Tell me about winter," she said again. "Winter is cold here," said Caleb, and Sarah and I laughed. "Winter is cold everywhere," I said. "We go to school in winter," said Caleb. "Sums and writing and books," he sang. "I am good at sums and writing," said Sarah. "I love books. How do you get to school?" "Papa drives us in the wagon, or we walk the 3 miles when there is not too much snow." Sarah sat up. "Do you have lots of snow?" "Lots and lots and lots of snow," chanted Caleb, rolling around in the grass. "Sometimes we have to dig our way out to feed the animals." "In Maine, the barns are attached to the houses sometimes," said Sarah. Caleb grinned. "So you could have a cow to Sunday supper?" Sarah and I laughed. "When there are bad storms, Papa ties a rope from the house to the barn so no one will get lost," said Caleb. I frowned. I loved winter. "There is ice on the windows on winter mornings," I told Sarah. "We can draw sparkling pictures and we can see our breath in the air. Papa builds a warm fire and we bake hot biscuits and put on hundreds of sweaters. And if the snow is too high, we stay home from school and make snow people." Sarah lay back in the tall grasses again, her face nearly hidden. "And is there wind?" she asked. "Do you like wind?" asked Caleb. "There is wind by the sea," said Sarah. "There is wind here," said Caleb happily. "It blows the snow and brings tumbleweeds and makes the sheep run." "Wind and wind and wind." Caleb stood up and ran like the wind, and the sheep ran after him. Sarah and I watched him jump over rocks and gullies, the sheep behind him, stiff-legged and fast. He circled the field, the sun making the top of his hair golden. He collapsed next to Sarah, and the lambs pushed their wet noses into us. "Hello, Lou," said Sarah, smiling. "Hello, Maddie." The sun rose higher, and Papa stopped to take off his hat and wipe his face with his sleeve. "I'm hot," said Sarah. "I can't wait for winter wind. Let's swim." "Swim where?" I asked her. "I can't swim," said Caleb. "Can't swim!" exclaimed Sarah. "I'll teach you in the cow pond." "That's for cows," I cried. But Sarah had grabbed our hands and we were running through the fields, ducking under the fence to the far pond. "Shoo, cows," said Sarah as the cows looked up, startled. She took off her dress and waded into the water in her petticoat. She dived suddenly and disappeared for a moment as Caleb and I watched. She came up, laughing, her hair streaming free. Water beads sat on her shoulders. She tried to teach us how to float. I sank like a bucket filled with water and came up sputtering. But Caleb lay on his back and learned how to blow streams of water high in the air like a whale. The cows stood on the banks of the pond and stared and stopped their chewing. Water bugs circled us. "Is this like the sea?" asked Caleb. Sarah treaded water. "The sea is salt," said Sarah. "It stretches out as far as you can see. It gleams like the sun on glass. There are waves." "Like this?" asked Caleb, and he pushed a wave at Sarah, making her cough and laugh. "Yes," she said, "like that." I held my breath and floated at last, looking up into the sky, afraid to speak. Crows flew over, 3 in a row, and I could hear a killdeer in the field. We climbed the bank and dried ourselves and lay in the grass again. The cows watched, their eyes sad in their dinner plate faces, and I slept, dreaming a perfect dream. The fields had turned to a sea that seemed like sun on glass, and Sarah was happy. Chapter 7. The dandelions in the field had gone by, their heads soft as feathers. The summer roses were opening. Our neighbors, Matthew and Maggie, came to help Papa plow up a new field for corn. Sarah stood with us on the porch, watching their wagon wind up the road, 2 horses pulling it and 1 tied in back. I remembered the last time we had stood here alone, Caleb and I, waiting for Sarah. Sarah's hair was in thick braids that circled her head, wild daisies tucked here and there. Papa had picked them for her. Old Bess and Jack ran along the inside of the fence, whickering at the new horses. Papa needs 5 horses for the big gang plow, Caleb told Sarah. Prairie grass is hard. Matthew and Maggie came with their 2 children and a sack full of chickens. Maggie emptied the sack into the yard, and 3 red banty chickens clucked and scattered. They are for you, she told Sarah, for eating. Sarah loved the chickens. She clucked back at them and fed them grain. They followed her, shuffling and scratching primly in the dirt. I knew they would not be for eating. The children were young and named Rose and Violet after flowers. They hooted and laughed and chased the chickens, who fled up the porch roof. Then the dogs, who crept quietly under the porch. Seal had long ago fled to the barn to sleep in cool hay. Sarah and Maggie helped hitch the horses to the plow. Then they set up a big table in the shade of the barn, covering it with a quilt and a kettle of flowers in the middle. They sat on the porch while Caleb and Matthew and Papa began their morning of plowing. I mixed biscuit dough just inside the door, watching. "You are lonely, yes?" asked Maggie in her soft voice. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Slowly, I stirred the dough. Maggie reached over and took Sarah's hand. "I miss the hills of Tennessee sometimes," she said. "Do not miss the hills, Maggie," I thought. "I miss the sea," said Sarah. "Do not miss the hills. Do not miss the sea." I stirred and stirred the dough. "I miss my brother William," said Sarah. "But he is married. The house is hers now, not mine any longer. There are 3 old aunts who all squawk together like crows at dawn. I miss them too." "There are always things to miss," said Maggie, "no matter where you are." I looked out and saw Papa and Matthew and Caleb working. Rose and Violet ran in the fields. I felt something brush my legs and looked down at Nick, wagging his tail. "I would miss you, Nick," I whispered. "I would." I knelt down and scratched his ears. "I miss Mama." "I nearly forgot," said Maggie on the porch. "I have something more for you." I carried the bowl outside and watched Maggie lift a low wooden box out of the wagon. "Plants," she said to Sarah, "for your garden." "My garden?" Sarah bent down to touch the plants. "Zinnias and marigolds and wild feverfew," said Maggie. "You must have a garden, wherever you are." Sarah smiled. "I had a garden in Maine with dahlias and columbine and nasturtiums and the color of the sun when it sets. I don't know if nasturtiums would grow here." "Try," said Maggie. "You must have a garden." We planted the flowers by the porch, turning over the soil and patting it around them and watering. Lottie and Nick came to sniff, and the chickens walked in the dirt, leaving prints. In the fields, the horses pulled the plow up and down under the hot summer sun. Maggie wiped her face, leaving a streak of dirt. "Soon you can drive your wagon over to my house, and I will give you more. I have tansy." Sarah frowned. I have never driven a wagon. I can teach you, said Maggie, and so can Anna and Caleb and Jacob. Sarah turned to me. Can you? She asked. Can you drive a wagon? I nodded. And Caleb? Yes. In Maine, said Sarah, I would walk to town. Here it is different, said Maggie. Here you will drive. Way off in the sky, clouds gathered. Matthew and Papa and Caleb came in from the fields, their work done. We all ate in the shade. We are glad you are here, said Matthew to Sarah. A new friend. Maggie misses her friends sometimes. Sarah nodded. There's always something to miss, no matter where you are, she said, smiling at Maggie. Rose and Violet fell asleep in the grass, their bellies full of meat and greens and biscuits. And when it was time to go, Papa and Matthew lifted them into the wagon to sleep on blankets. Sarah walked slowly behind the wagon for a long time, waving, watching it disappear. Caleb and I ran to bring her back, the chickens running wildly behind us. What shall we name them? Asked Sarah, laughing as the chickens followed us into the house. I smiled. I was right. The chickens would not be for eating. And then Papa came just before the rain, bringing Sarah the first roses of summer.